Hello and welcome to a Dawn of War 2 instructional cast of the Chaos Space Marines. This is in the Elite Mod version of Dawn of War 2. My name is Mikash and this patch is 2.5. It is March the 4th. It's been a little while since 2.5 came out as I'm recording this. And this is a game played some time ago, shortly after release, with a friend of mine by the name of Looniest Rumble. A big shout out to him. So, what we're going to be doing here for these instructional videos, this is the first, but you can expect a very similar sort of feel to the rest of the videos, is describing all the units, describing all the heroes, their globals, all of the things that makes the army tick. And the purpose is, although all this information is available in the codex, not everyone is a big reader. Some people are spending a lot more time online watching videos and that sort of thing, and this way you can get all of that information in a condensed form. It will take a while because of all of it, but starting with damage types and armor types and chaos here today. Here are heretics. Here is their melee damage and their pathetic range damage. They can get an aspiring champion to lead their squad. It gives them quite a bit more hit points, and you can see some more melee damage. These guys are currently unupgraded here. We're going to send them into the fray here in a moment. They're infantry, regular infantry armor. So this means that they do not take reduced damage from any type of weapon. They have an ability that you saw me highlighting there called Doom Blast that will help them in melee. So let's throw them into the melee so you can see it. Essentially what it does is causes them to explode, losing a unit of the squad, but damaging nearby enemies for plasma damage and suppressing them. We'll talk a bit more about suppression when the suppression teams come up. They have some other abilities, heretics as well, but we want to focus next on the main fighting unit of the Chaos Forces, the Chaos Space Marines. Here you see their damage types. Their armor type is heavy infantry. Don't mind the marker down there on the bottom right. So these guys take reduced damage from piercing and regular melee. As you can see, they're dealing some damage here to a commander with their regular piercing damage. Not terrific damage. They do get an upgrade here, which you'll see activate. That is the Eternal War. It is a boost to both their melee and ranged damage. So a very important upgrade for these guys, as they are, as I said, the backbone of fighting force. And look at them peel the life off of that guy. Now, here you see the Mark of Tzeentch, one of their two main squad upgrades that completely changes the squad from regular ranged piercing damage, in this case to Inferno damage, summoning an aspiring champion for them as well. You can see the aspiring champion will also, in this particular unit type, deal that very delicious Inferno damage. Okay, these upgrades are pretty important depending on the type of enemy you're fighting. Heavy infantry takes lots of damage from those guys, as you can see, so do commanders. Here's the regular aspiring champion loadout. Here's the Mark of Khorne loadout. All the units get those axes. The leader gets the Melta. Everyone else gets plasma. And you can see with the heavy melee damage, although these are just regular infantry armor types, they're dealing lots more of it. That's because they do have a buff damage here, an increase in melee skill, and some health regen. Now, melee skill is another thing that's very important to know about. Heretics have lots of it, but it doesn't really affect them. What it does affect are units more like these guys and the knobs they're fighting. You can see they have a slightly higher melee skill there as they knock over those knobs. That is coming from the aspiring champion, most likely. Basically, what it means is that specials will occur more often against you when you have a lower melee skill than your opponent. So here these guys definitely not able to deal enough damage to kill some unupgraded knobs. But the great thing about them is they do not cost power to reinforce. So here you saw some damage. This is for a setup team. This first setup team is just regular Chaos Havocs. Talked about suppression before. You'll see it happen to these guys now. And these knobs are going to try to come in. Even though they are heavy infantry, they do take all kinds of damage from this thing. Suppression will not only slow you, as you can see here, but for anyone that has a ranged attack, it will also make it so that that happens much less often. One of their upgrades, Mark of Khorne, you'll see here, fires an autocannon. Although it doesn't suppress, you can see it does do good damage. Much better damage against vehicles, though. Look at that big, nasty damage. That Death Dread wishes it hadn't done that. Here you see the other upgrade, the Mark of Tzeentch. More of like a sniper long-range anti-tank weapon. It does deal less damage per second, more damage per hit. Just that cooldown time in between. Both of these weapons are pretty important depending on, again, what you're fighting. So tanks will suffer greatly from this, and you'll see here in a moment as it's slowed when it gets hit. So that snare is important in keeping the tank from getting to you, especially in the case of one of these, a melee walker. And the combination of the two really tears it down quickly. So here you see the loadout for the next unit, Noise Marines. Here they are. They are particularly noisy. I have the game sounds turned off so you can hear all this a little better, since me and Lunius were just sort of chatting about what we were going to do here. They have a flame weapon, essentially, that, as you can see them pouring it on, prevents units from firing. It's essentially a suppression for everyone that gets hit by it, and also prevents them from using abilities. Now, these guys can be upgraded from that crazy weapon to this. Oh, I should mention as well, their previous weapon, also excellent against buildings. The flame type is excellent against building armor. While they're waiting, you'll see heretics worshipping a shrine there. Heretics are also capable of worshipping. I didn't mention that before. But these Noise Marines you'll see are getting ready. What they're going to do is fire a plasma ball capable of knockback and a fair amount of damage, especially in units that gather in clump and have large numbers. They can really do a number on them. So what you'll see next here as these knobs come in, and I have to get rid of these guys for pop cap reasons during our game, is you'll see them actually be used on some other units. We realize at the last moment, wait a minute, we want to see them actually tear down some squishy infantry. Well, these are squishy infantry, and the damage is devastating. Raptors are our next choice. These are a jump melee troop. You can see their aspiring champions war gear here as well. He's not purchased at the current moment. You can see there's only 3 members, and his upgrade is listed as available. Here's their jump, and they actually suppress on landing and continue to suppress for a short period afterwards. So lots of suppression here in that Chaos Tier 1. And that's good for melee-heavy armies like this, where you can pin your enemy down and prevent them from firing, so you can run in and beat them up like that. Here they are with their aspiring champion and his power fist. They are going to get the drop on some units here. These units, however, are knobs, and knobs are not especially easy to deal with. And as you can see, they're okay, but even with, although the suppression kicks in, they're pretty quickly dealt with here by the knobs. Knobs have heavy melee damage type, which deals all kinds of damage to them. So here you see their upgrade is a loadout of Melta weapons. These are capable anti-vehicle weapon upgrades. They retain their jump, they lose their suppression on land, but they do gain a bomb, which you saw there, that dealt lots of damage and froze the walker. Coming up next are these guys. They are regular infantry type, which is unlike all the others we've seen so far. They are bloodletters. They are the first demon type we'll be discussing. The reason I've been kind of putting off Chaos Worship as well is because of demons. Demons will gain different benefits under Worship. You saw a little bit of it there, but those green circles underneath the unit markers are telling you that they are in Worship. So in this case here, as they are knocking down enemies, they are gaining life back as well as energy. 13 health per second under Nurgle, 10 under the rest, so it's just a bonus healing as the bonus benefit of Nurgle, as well as some energy regeneration. These guys have power melee damage and are good at stripping life off of heavier units like these knobs, but their light infantry armor and low hit point totals overall, we'll see them get handily defeated here by these knobs. Heretics, as I mentioned before, were worshipping at a shrine. When they worship a shrine, it's actually a different effect. The Shrine of Nurgle will suppress enemies and heal allies intermittently and more frequently when it is worshipped. And finally, you see here those guys going down. Coming up next are our Dreadnoughts. We're getting into vehicle territory now. The Walker Dreadnought in its default state with an autocannon and a claw. You can see the autocannon doesn't do too much to these knobs at range. And when they get in, they start tearing huge chunks of life off him. That's because this is one of the units that we're going to be covering that has no melee resist aura. Most units have one of these things. It's an aura that is a default. They take 40% less damage from melee attacks. It's passive. Now, this guy upgraded with a missile launcher still does not have the melee resist aura, so that's difficult for him. But he does gain a missile launcher, and you can see here it's capable of suppressing infantry, deals damage to them. And naturally, as you can imagine, it deals quite a bit of damage to tanks, as missile weapons are the anti-tank weapon. Now, just because this guy is, not very scary in melee to units that are specializing in dealing the type of damage to hurt him, as you can see, he's capable of killing all sorts of weakling units in melee. Here we have the Dreadnought looking down its enemy. It is a Ork Death Dread. He gets a couple of shots in on it both times. You can see he has 3-shot bursts. The last one looked like it may have been interrupted there, and then they're going to go to town against each other. The other unit, the Death Dread, has melee resist. This Chaos Dreadnought does not, but as you can see, it hardly matters that the Death Dread has less HP. It took some range damage, but as you can see, it will go down here to the Chaos Dreadnought, just a little tougher and more capable. Here you see the other upgrade it's capable of, the Mark of Khorne. Khorne is very good at slaughtering things in melee, which is what this guy does. He gains the melee resist aura. His secondary weapon becomes another claw, so very little in the way of range damage, just a bolter. And he gains this Blood Rage ability, which you can see here, him going to town. And essentially, you lose control of the Dreadnought. It deals increased damage. It takes reduced damage. You can see some of those factors on the codex that I was mentioning before. And yeah, essentially, it allows them to deal a lot more damage. Another melee vehicle for these Chaos Space Marines is the Blood Crusher. It benefits from not only being a vehicle, but also a demon, and so therefore benefits from the worship. So he's got 2 abilities. You'll see one go off here. This is the Demonic Roar. Essentially what it does is it scatters any infantry units that are nearby and pushes them away, allowing him to escape a nasty melee fight that he's about to lose, like against Knobs. And we're going to display his other ability here, which is a charge. This will knock back and damage enemy units that are fought in the way. But as you can see, his reduced hit point pool allows him to take tremendous amounts of damage from things like beamy def guns, which is what is shooting him. Essentially a last cannon for Orks. So we've been killing a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff has been dying. You gain red in this game from death. That red is now being used to cast one of Nurgle's many plagues, a Noxious Cloud, a controllable unit that moves towards the enemy, and as you can see is murdering all sorts of Orks. Even in retreat, it deals power melee damage to anything caught in its path. Another option is Touch of Nurgle. You enchant one of your units with it. Here you can see some Aspiring Champion Heretics with it on, and they deal tremendous damage to this Orc Slugga squad. All kinds of hurt going in on them when used. Essentially what it does is it does greater knockback and damage on the death of any one unit in a squad. So of course you can use Touch of Nurgle on any squad you may have that's infantry, but since Heretics already can explode to deal damage as part of their deal, it is commonly used on them. This ability has been nerfed greatly in the time since Elite Mod came out due to being super OP. Coming up next we have Plague Marines. It's a 3-man squad of regular infantry armor, but tons of hit points. They have a missile launcher, a pair of bolters. These bolters function much like the one that the Plague Champion has that we'll be covering later. They deal damage over time. So here you can see 2 squads firing at each other from a distance. They both have cover. It is equal cover. However, you can see the other squad is taking more damage. That's not only because the other squad is pathetic in comparison. It is also because these Plague Marines bolters deal that damage over time. So even units in cover will continue to take increased damage so long as they are being hit by these bolters. And units that melee with the Plague Marines are also slowed, and these guys do explode on death, much like the Touch of Nurgle. Here you'll see their Chosen Brethren, which also cost red, the Chosen Plague Marines, unique infantry to the Plague Champion. He has regular infantry armor, these gentlemen, and they have close combat knives that deal power melee damage and plasma pistols. When they get in close and they kill units here, as you can see, from that ability being activated, they are creating zombies. These zombies are a duplicate to the best of the game's ability of the unit you're fighting. It is usually their unupgraded format. So in this case, we killed some beamy Ludas and we got some regular Ludas. Another upgrade we missed earlier for the Heretics was grenade launchers, so we're going to show you that now. Here you can see they're firing a grenade barrage. Replacing all of their swords are grenade launchers for 4 members, the rest with rifles. The barrage does knock back and extra damage, and grenade damage will ignore cover. Coming up next is True Tanks. Here you see a basic default Chaos Predator dealing a moderate amount of damage here to a Death Dread. With its Mark of Tzeentch upgrade, however, you can see that the top turret has been replaced with a double last cannon capable of dealing tons of damage to vehicles. all kinds of damage to those vehicles. It does pretty bad damage as well against buildings. It's capable of tearing stuff down pretty quickly. Nothing really happens to the bolters on the side, unlike with this guy, the Mark of Khorne. This upgrade will instead give you the cannon and the side cannons more damage. And as you can see there, it does do a fair amount of that damage. Now, against infantry squads, both of these tanks that we've talked about so far, as well as the original, will sort of suffer. Enemies that are clumped up in low hit points, obviously you'll take all kinds of damage, because much like a grenade, a tank shell will damage an area. These knobs, however, have heavy melee damage, and tanks will go down very quickly to that, as you can see. And all tanks take reduced, or I should say increased damage from rear armor. Walkers do not, but most tanks that are not land raiders do. Here you see the Nurgle upgrade. This is a very different upgrade for the tank, and was actually added by Elite Mod. What it will do is it'll create flame damage on the area the tank shell lands. As you can see, it's doing pretty pathetic damage to that Def Dread. But it does slow the tank down as well, but gives it a healing ability so that it will regain hit points over time and give it a lot more hit points. So it really changes up the tank. A very cool and interesting addition, and as you can see, it decimates infantry. These sluggas and shooters don't want anything to do with that. Getting back to our red that's been building up here, we're going to spend some of it to show you the power of the summoning circle, the nuke as it's called basically, for the Chaos Space Marines. These knobs though, so tanky, they are walking right through it with their upgrades. I have something in store for them on the other side of it though. It's the Great Unclean One. Now, as you can see, the nuke is pulling units in. There are chains that come out of that nuke. Anyone who's closer to the middle takes increased damage. But now I've got another demon pursuing them. Its first ability, a vomit, you'll see go down there. It deals plasma damage to anyone caught in a short cone around the front of the Great Unclean One when he uses it. And he's got a couple other abilities up his sleeve here. He's not going to be using one of them, so I'll just go into it now. These heretics that are praying off to the side. He could consume one of them for a small amount of health, a good amount of energy. And that helps him keep his energy levels up to cast more abilities. He's got that huge sword in his hands as well, dealing all kinds of big nasty damage. Picking up and throwing a model there with a sync kill, very nice. And he takes care of the rest of those knobs. But as you can see, despite his damage, does take a great amount of damage himself from those heavy melee weapons of the knobs. So he's going to wander into the middle here, and we're going to show you an engagement where he's got some kind of scarier abilities. One especially scary against commanders and anyone that is trying to get away from him but maybe isn't fleeing. There you have it. And basically what it does is it will pull the enemy unit towards the Great Unclean One. And here's another one that deals AoE damage against all units in the area. That one is called Swarm of Flies. I'll get you the name of the other one here, but something else very important is happening now. And essentially what it is the death of the Great Unclean One, which is not something you want to stick around for. We've shown you all the damage that can be dealt to knobs and how tough they really are. But the death explosion that comes from a Great Unclean One actually kills a knob squad, and the upgraded squad lives by the skin of its teeth. Okay, the other ability it used, by the way, Foul Snare. So here we have some Chaos Terminators, super heavy infantry. They are armed with some, by default anyway, bolters mounted on one wrist. Their other hand is a power fist. And as you can see, they are taking a pretty severe beating from these knobs. They're super heavy infantry, takes lots of damage from that heavy melee. Here they have an auto cannon. This is one of their 2 upgrades to make them a better ranged unit. Their regular piercing damage is quite high per model, but the auto cannon does add a nice splash effect, so good against blobs of enemy units such as guardsmen or shootas or sluggas. These guys in their tankiness, as you can see, taking lots of damage. They have that red aura underneath them. That means that an enemy unit has died, or one of their allied units, I should say, has died nearby. And so as a result, these guys will now deal less damage. That does stack up to a certain amount as well that you'll be able to find in the codex, or I can get you before the video is out. Should have time right now because here you see some Lightning Claw Terminators, and these guys are going to go to town against some knobs. These knobs are fully upgraded. You can see their huge hammers coming into play here. The Lightning Claws and the tremendous damage that they deal, however, are going to be more than enough to tear down these knobs. I don't even think they lose a model to these guys with their power melee damage. So we were talking before. Yeah, so that's pretty brutal. So here you're going to see them fighting a tank with these as well. The power fists would actually do better because they're heavy. but because there's so much damage behind these lightning claws and there are 3 models, you're going to see they're going to do a tremendous job against these guys here as well. The piercing damage, as I was mentioning before, for each Stormbolter member, you're looking at 68 damage per hit, about 30 DPS per second. That's very nice. So their teleport, as you can see, doesn't do anything with their energy. They have no energy, so that's another important note. And the stacks for Demoralize was the other part. 5 times it stacks for a grand total of doing, let's see here, 15% less damage. They also receive 10% more. Here you have the Land Raider Phobos. Saw some damage types there. 2 of them were the exact same. That's because it has 2 twin-linked last cannons, much like the previous tank, except double. Now, here you're going to see it using an ability called the Dirge Caster. This is a stun in an area of effect around the tank. You can see the area is quite large, but it does not affect vehicles, as that thing just kept on trying to punch the Land Raider. Land Raider Phobos, one of the weaker of the, I believe actually the weakest of all the Land Raiders as far as hit points is concerned. And this is an exercise in showing you just how easily a super unit, because this thing is considered a super unit, can be lost in Dawn of War 2. This thing gets torn down so quickly. And before you know it, it's over. So always support your units. One guy that can support quite a bit is the Plague Champion. He's capable of repairing units and buildings. He is also an excellent fighter for a lot of different purposes. He has that damage over time bolter to begin with. And if that's not scary enough, he can also equip 3 others. Now he can also build turrets as part of his thing as well, and they have a wider firing arc than some of the other turrets you'll see built. Now you can see him burning down some buildings here very quickly, and this is a exercise in the use of the essentially a flamer weapon that he has access to in Tier 1. So this is a great weapon you can rush your enemy with. Not that he's capable of rushing anywhere because he's extremely slow. But the Bile Spewer, as you can see, he's attacking ground. He's dealing tons of damage to these generators. Great way to set your enemy back in the early game. But as you can see here against this lone Commando Knob, not a great way to deal tons of damage, as he is easily tanking that. Enemies in cover will take more damage. Here you can see him using a discharge that slows units that it hits. The weapon slows units that it hits as well, so hitting them with both the regular attack and that special ability will deal about a perfect snare. And there you saw some nasty grenade damage, which comes from one of his upgrades as well. So here you'll see a slightly different build. Here he has a sword that is basically capable of creating zombies off of units that he kills. He can also, and just has, activated an ability to suppress enemies around him, a foul stench, and this will continue to suppress infantry over time, dealing that courage damage that suppression is based on over and over again over a period, as well as extra damage per second. We almost forgot when we saw these double sluggas that we wanted to show you how easily they can be torn down by Terminators with lightning claws. They make short work of just about everything in the rosters of every race. Something else that the Plague Champ had in his last section, and you'll see him here with again, is the Icon of Nurgle. It is a passive equipment. Passive, always very nice. Less micro for you. Will deal piercing damage to enemies around him. Here you can see him taking reduced damage because of something called Pestilent Strike. He uses it on his Power Fist, and it is a great capping tool, reducing incoming range damage by 90%. Here you're going to see him take a couple of shots and punch this guy in the face. Some great melee action here. He gets quite a few interesting specials and a nice little melee charge and a plasma pistol. His other armor, which is unlocked in Tier 2, is capable of slowing him even further, and you're thinking, well, why would I want to do that? Well, because you can do this. Huge knockback, a damage at the time of explosion attack, and as you can see from the ability on the bottom right, it charges from taking damage. So it will be used each time he takes a certain amount of damage, because he's capable of healing through heretics, through being at his base, through standing next to the shrines, and also from another one of his abilities called Mucus Discharge. He is able to do this multiple times per engagement, depending on the engagement. You saw the Power Fist there wrecking that tank. That is because he is a wrecker of tanks with that thing. It's heavy melee damage. Here you'll see him take on the double slugga build that my friend Lunius Rumble is fielding as part of this video here. And he does quite the number on them. This guy by himself with no help and already a reduced hit point pool could have probably won this fight had I decided to reuse his other ability there. I did do the Pestilent Strike, so you can see that it stuns enemies in a radius as well. Very important part of using that ability. because if you are in the melee, you can really knock down the hit point pools of those guys. So the next Chaos Hero is next on the list. This is the Chaos Lord. You can see that he's quite slow himself in Terminator armor. Still considered Commander armor, though. The Worship actually speeds him up. Now, this is because they don't have a transport unit other than the Phobos, which is your tier 3 endgame unit. This Worship by Heretics is very important to help get your engagement started because it makes you quite a bit faster. Here's some of his stuff. You can see his different damage types and his different weapons. You saw him wrecking some of the terrain as well because he has crushing ability. So when he walks around, stuff falls around him and gets destroyed, as do low hit point, high model count squads. You'll see his starting ability come into play here. This is Kill the Weak. Everyone that is hit by it in an area around the Chaos Lord takes damage, which heals him for a certain specified amount. And here you'll see the Dark Halo, which drains his energy. And every 5 energy that he loses, every 1 energy that he loses counts for 5 points of damage. So that shield helps him stay in combat. Here you see the Shrine of Khorne. This will summon Bloodletters periodically, more often if worshipped. They will stay until their energy runs out, and they will fight for you. Same as the Bloodletters we discussed before. And any units in range of this building will also have their damage increased by 10%. So here you see some of the other stuff that this guy is capable of doing. He currently has the Combi Flamer. It is increasing his range damage output, makes him great at picking off low hit point models like Heretics, if he's in a mirror, or if he's fighting Guardsmen, or even Eldar's starting units such as Banshees or Dire Avengers. Here you can see he has an ability that will lay flame down on an area, great for getting units out of buildings. Not as great as you can see at bashing power, in comparison to what the Plague Champ does. He really is the best basher, but here is Let the Galaxy Burn, considered to be one of the best abilities for any hero attached to an armor that he gets in tier 2. He's capable of nuking all kinds of infantry with that fire. And the longer they stay in it, the longer they burn. Here you can see another armor ability of his, Drain Life, which will pick up and throw an enemy commander, especially helpful against tanky commanders that are busy messing with your stuff. I had mentioned in a previous iteration of preparing this video that I thought that it was especially good against the Force Commander. If the Force Commander has Battlecry activated, I have not seen him actually be picked up and thrown away by it. Important to note. This guy has another passive armor as well that gives him some hit points and some energy regen, as well as energy for anyone around him when he hits people. But that hit that you just saw that knocked all those enemies across the screen is Sweeping Doom attached to his heavy mace, the Blood Maul. It allows him to not only disrupt infantry, but will also get him out of binds if he's surrounded and is ready to die. You saw a Kill the Weak go off there as well. He has another set of melee weapons. These are Lightning Claws. Like you saw previously, they are good at tearing up all sorts of nasty enemies. And here you'll see the Destructive Strike with the Lightning Claws, which deals damage to enemies in a line, knocking them back. You see he's gaining hit points back. That's because he has a Icon of Khorne as his other one of his other accessories, they're called, actually. And this accessory will give him back hit points for each time he deals damage. And the faster his melee attacks are, the more health he heals. Therefore, they are best with Lightning Claws, his fastest weapon. He has another passive accessory as well, which will essentially demoralize enemies like Terminators. Here you can see his globals. His globals are pretty tough to show you, especially Malignant Blindness, which is just reducing the sight range of the enemy. Bloodlust for increased damage, and Blood Sacrifice to lose a unit to spawn temporary Bloodletters, a full 4-unit squad. Here you see some damage types. This is my favorite guy. You saw him at the start. You're going to see him here again. It's the Chaos Sorcerer. Now his worship will create a field of stealth. So units are infiltrated, the game calls it, when they are under the effects of worship. Here you see some starting abilities and what he's going to be doing during the engagement. Doom Bolts, some of the only plasma damage available in Tier 1 in the game, and it comes from this guy. So much damage. He currently has the Sword of Flame as well. You'll see him get a nice special here after he bleeds these units through a nice bottleneck. The Sword of Flame, when it is cast on an enemy or on an allied unit, will give them additional damage over time through fire damage when he melees stuff down. Here you can see his Shrine, the Shrine of Tzeentch. Enemies nearby will actually gain 10% damage resistance, and that thing also fires bolts like his plasma bolts. and they will fire more often if it is worshipped. Here you can see I'm trying to open up a warp rift. I actually missed it, so Looney was kind enough to walk into it so you can see what it does. It will create one portal next to the sorcerer, another where he casts it, and units will be transported between those 2 points, friendly and enemy. See, he's also capable of warping with one of his armors. That is the main ability of his to get around the map and help you really cap things up. Much like the Great Unclean one, he's also capable of consuming heretics, since he does have a very dependent on tremendous amounts of energy type build because of all the spells that he has. So you'll see another one coming up here in a moment. But this guy doesn't really have any passives. Everything that he has is active, and because of that, he requires lots of energy. Warp Fire is an example. The rod that he receives in Tier 2, which still doesn't really change his damage type, but is pretty cool. You'll see here has a line domino knockback plasma effect. I did miss most of the squad, but that unit sure died. You can see he also has an armor that provides a demonic shield. You'll see it go up here a little late. That was a bit of a misclick on my part. But as the shield goes up, enemies are dealing, I believe, 40 or 50% less damage to anyone that is inside that bubble. So sort of like the Plague Champion's weapon ability, but can hide other units in it. This is an interesting one. We had to get another unit out here to help deal some damage, so some Chaos Space Marines were nice enough to join us to murder the Unclean. And this is the Curse of Tzeentch. You'll see a unit explode here. That is because under this curse, as enemies die, they will explode, dealing knockback and a portion of that enemy unit's hit points as damage. We're going to throw 2 things on here. There's some pretty interesting stuff going on. You're going to see the first is Subjugate. Any non-hero, non-vehicle unit can be subjugated. They're immune to damage. They cannot be retreated, but their abilities will still work, and you can use them against your enemy so that he's basically fighting 2 of his own squads amongst one another. And then when that fails, you see he puts down the Chains of Torment, that central chain there that you can see losing hit points in the green. That needs to be destroyed before any of these units can move. Right now, they are currently snared. So his globals coming up here. You're going to see those now. First is a demonic summoning. You'll see some bloodletters spawning in periodically. That is because he has opened a rift to the warp, and it will allow friendly units to reinforce. So those raptors almost going down there until they get another model added in because of reinforcement. Very helpful. They're busy tearing down this tank with the power fist that comes from their aspiring champion. I try to jump them in, and then I realize, oh, well, you know, he's dealing quite a bit of damage, but the sorcerer can teleport too. So I path block it, and he kills it. He's got some other ones. Dark Flames. This is a tremendously annoying global for most of your enemies that you'll face. It lays down a line of fire that will burn enemies while they stand in it, and even after they walk away for a period of time. Because buildings are stationary, it's actually perfect for taking out turrets, as well as beacons that are placed by the Tech Marine. Here you'll see another glorious ability of his. It is Warp. This global will summon 1 unit from your roster card into the battle directly on top of the Chaos Sorcerer. In this case, a Dreadnought. This is especially good for getting your units out of trouble as opposed to in, but can be used to certainly rush your units in. So this is my cat tax, and here is my contact info. If you have any questions or would like to see some different movies coming up, you let me know. I'm going to be having a contest through the voting on the comments for this on YouTube, where you'll be able to tell me which race should be next. Hope you enjoy, and see you next time.